Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
Hey, comics fam! Does a realm-trotting dystopian fantasy adventure that cleverly explores Norse mythology sound up your alley? It sure does mine. So I was excited to see one of my favorite comic creators, Eisner and Harvey Award-winning Michael Avon Oeming, is launching a new Kickstarter project collecting issues 1 through 5 of his creator-owned series After the Realm in July. I just got a chance to get an early peek, and it's fantastic. With over 300 pages of material, including 22 new pages of story, it follows a young, rebellious ranger named Una Lightfoot trying to find her best friend. As the tale of friendship and destiny unfolds, the 9 realms are torn asunder, with Loki up to his usual troublemaking self, of course. It should come as no surprise at this point that the cast of unusual characters Michael created in the book includes some anthropomorphic animals. But I can't say I've ever seen them riding roughshod across the land in mini tanks a la Mad Max Fury Road before, so I'm so here for it. Quirky, slightly beautifully unhinged, and completely engrossing, the immediate analogs to me were The Legend of Zelda meets The Mighty Thor with Norse underpinnings for perspective. Michael is handling both the writing and the artwork duties, with Taki Soma on colors and Sean Lee lettering the project. Head on over to Kickstarter and make sure you back this, cause it's epic. Y'all, Jimmy, the Chaos Goblin, strikes again. I should have known better than to mention I was working on my DC Universe meets Ravenloft hybrid D&D campaign on social media. My bad. He goes and tags a bunch of comics creators we know, and now I have to get it in gear and whip this campaign into shape so we can start playing. Another friend chimes in, "Are you going to make maps?" It's fair to say it's been a while since I put something together, so I guess? It was then that I discovered Arkenforge. If you don't know who Arkenforge is, they have everything you need to make your TTRPG more fun and immersive, allowing you to build, play, and export animated maps, including in-person fog of war capability that lets your players interact with maps as the adventure unfolds while you, the DM, get the full picture. Now I'm set to easily build high-res animated maps, saving myself precious time and significantly adding nuance to our campaign. That's a win every day in my book. Check them out at arkenforge.com and use the discount code YETI5 to get $5 off. I'll drop a link in the show notes for you, and big thanks to Arkenforge for partnering with our show. I think I'm going to make Jimmy play a Goblin Warlock just to get even. Hello, this is Byron O'Neill, your host for today's Comics Creator Chat. I'm really excited about this one because I'm having the creative team behind one of my favorite books of the last few years back on the show to talk about the second volume of their middle grade fantasy adventure series, Goblin, the Wolf, and the Well from Dark Horse Comics. Writer Eric Grissom and artist colorist letterer probably has a Leatherman in his pocket too, because he's ready to do about anything. Will Perkins have crafted a simply phenomenal follow-up here. Gents, welcome back to the show. It's been a minute. Are you excited about seeing Goblin 2 in the wild next month?
Yeah. Well, first off, hello. Thank
Hi.
you. Thank you for having us on here. Yeah,
course.
absolutely. Extremely excited to finally
And
have the book out.
minor correction, the beautiful letters, those are all Eric. I stuck the
Oh, yes.
colors.
Yeah.
The rest is Eric. That's his beautiful work.
I misspoke then. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Will and I are do basically everything. Will does all of the inks, the colors, the covers, and I do the design and the lettering.
Okay.
Symbols
as well as
between
the
my
writing.
knees, snare drum on my back.
Yeah,
like
so
the whole
it
Dick
goes-
Van Dyke approach.
Yeah, it goes back and forth between us. But
Nice.
yeah, it's out. It's almost out. We're less than a month away now.
Yeah.
It's like with comics, you just spend so much time alone, like off in the woods, and then it's just this like build up to it when it comes out, and then it's almost too fast, and then it's over, and then it's like the crushing, falling off the cliff depression post launch when you're like,
Yeah.
oh god, I got to go back in a cave again and work on the next thing.
Yeah. How do we get this back up on Amazon Reads again?
Right.
Yeah. Well, I understand there's been a print run of the first volume of Goblin in another language, and that's exciting. How'd that all come about?
Yeah, that was a surprise. I mean, I've never had experienced anything like that before. So we were just approached by our publisher, Dark Horse, who puts out the Goblin series, that I guess they work with Comics Centrum, who is a Czech Republic partner or publisher. So they, I guess, option the rights or purchased the rights from us to publish in the Czech Republic. So that was the easiest thing that we had to do, because it was just like looking over a term sheet, agreeing to it, and then someone else over there laid it all out. Someone else did all the letters. I mean, I had to provide the files for them to do the translations, and they did a amazing job. Like, they sent me a copy of it, and like, it's a beautiful hardcover. It
Mhm.
has map end papers, which I live and die for. Like, it was like, I was very impressed with that. But that
That's
was
really
exciting.
cool.
Yeah, it's
Nice.
beautiful.
Well,
I don't speak that language, so I'm assuming it's what I wrote, and it's not something totally different. But I'm gonna believe in them, I guess.
well, who do we have to talk to at Dark Horse to get the American hardcover version
Yeah,
then?
well, write your congressman,
Yeah.
person, I guess.
They might be a little
Start a
busy
letter
at the
campaign.
moment.
Yeah.
All
No,
right.
that would be nice. Yeah, like the not that there's anything wrong with the US version. I encourage everyone to buy the US version, but you're right. I mean, if we could get a hardcover of the book, it would, and of the new book.
Daydream.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll get the collected omnibus at some point,
Yeah.
right? There we
It's a
go.
tough market. I mean, it's very competitive. There's a lot of books, and printing is still kind of expensive, shipping and everything else. So I get it for why it's soft cover.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I did too. I did too. And I think that's more in line with the middle grade market anyway. I mean, that
Yes.
feels pretty on
Yeah.
the nose for that. Cool. Well, kind of my comment about seeing Goblin in the wild is a little bit off base in Volume 2, because we aren't exactly seeing our little goblin buddy Rikt romping around the forest as much. Kind of after a prophetic encounter that foretells of pending peril for his best bud and Wolf Fishbreath, he's thrown into school, of all things. So let's start there, as boarding school is kind of the meat and potatoes of lots of middle grade focused entertainment. It was kind of a little bit unexpected for me, honestly, although maybe it should have been. So, what do you both love about that specific, kind of sandbox of going back to school?
I was particularly like I was caught off guard when he recommended it to me. After the first book, I was trying to seed Eric with ideas that he hates. But like the idea, are we going onto the ocean? Are we going to the desert? What are we doing? Like, where are we going?
Yeah.
And he's told me that he had a vision of Rick standing in the school uniform. And I was like, really? School? And then like he delivered the script, and it was it's so fun to have that character who, like you said, is so used to being in the wild, be so confined and so claustrophobic for an entire book. It really made you like root for the characters in a different way, like while
Yeah.
I'm reading it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Eric, what about you?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I don't approach the story thinking like, okay, we were out in the open and everything was sort of this expansive adventure. Now I need to go in the opposite direction. Like Will had mentioned, like I had the idea of, or the image of, Rick trying on like a very tight schoolboy uniform and falling over, which then starts leading to other questions. Okay, that's a great image, but why would he be wearing this uniform? And like, why would he ever decide to do that? And then the story sort of builds itself,
Yeah.
and it's more based on sort of like an intuitive approach to that story. But as I was writing it and as I was building it, it became obvious, like, yeah, we've already done like the adventure epic sprawling, going from one point to the other kind of road movie slash book that the first one was. That to take those characters and put them in a totally different situation and confine them, and a lot of like the meat or the soul of the book also came from personal experiences. So a lot of that was just coming out or fueling all of the stuff with school, especially that time of school that's so hard, middle school,
Yeah.
and all the things that you have to deal with. And school is a huge part of it. Was for me. I know it was for Will and for a lot of the readers. So that became the story. Sort of found itself that way.
Okay. Well, Will, I'm sure you got into trouble at least once, right, for drawing during class.
Yeah.
So it must have been enjoyable to kind of tread the ground in a very different way. And was there any desire there to kind of find a former teacher and say, "Yes, I do this for a living now. This is my job."
I mean, I not actually reach. I mean, I have actually a mentor from mine from college that kind of he was kind enough throughout the entire process of college, be like, this curriculum is not going to really help. Like I was very determined to be in line art and comic book art at the time, and so I always tried to keep up with him and kind of show him what I've been up to. But No, I've been pretty lucky with drawing was kind of like my escape all through school. And I was an English major up until college. And like I remember having like, I was an awful speller, terrible speller, which is why I don't do the lettering. And I remember even back then having like a barter system with teachers who were just like, listen, I will do a full illustration on your papers, on your spelling bees. If you just get above an 80, you can do this. And my English teachers were wonderful. It was a wonderful draftsman. I just remember being like, all right, I could do this. And that was like, that's how I got through it. But like since then, no, I haven't been itching to go back. Ever since I
Well,
abandoned a teaching degree, I was done.
okay. Well, there's some fairly straightforward comparisons to the Underwood School here, to me, to Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. So, kind of what influenced you both that you knew you just had to inject. Okay, I've been waiting to put this in a school setting, or when you were thinking about coming up with the narrative. All right, this makes perfect sense for a school.
Well, a lot of this, I will mention that he had a Catholic. I think you mentioned the Catholic school bit, or I'm just
Oh,
compounding two multiple interviews. But
you're
I
good.
also went to Catholic school, so there was some of that feeding into that. So it was like sort of working out some of those uh, demons. But the idea of just school and taking someone that's like a free spirit and watching that his culture and his uh, own mental health get crushed by a system. School was a
Yeah,
perfect sort of fit for that, more than trying to like replicate a Hogwarts. I guess in a way it's kind of like a opposite of Hogwarts because they're not enhancing your magical abilities. If anything, they're sort of removing them.
Yeah.
But it was more of the time frame and the fact that they live at the school was sort of like, for me was about home situations that were going on mixed with school. So like that, the idea that you have no safe place and you have no escape. And if you're
hmm
there already at a heightened sense of like anxiety and dread, how you react and how you survive, more than anything.
Okay.
and for me, it
Yeah.
was
I
the
mean,
frustration of it. Like
okay.
my memories of Catholic school were more because I was only there for like 4 or 5 years. But like that frustration of just every teenage has with authority, right? Of just like, but I know this thing is right or is right for me, and not really gelling with that system that's trying to kind of break you, I guess, but like just try to control you a little bit, and that really leapt out to me in the story.
Yeah, and not to single out Catholic schools at all. I also went to public schools. I moved many times when I
hmm
was younger. And my second grade public school teacher, she's probably gone, I hope, was a monster. Way worse than any Catholic school teacher that I ever had. So if she were still around, I would love to throw the book at her house or something.
Yeah.
She was awful, awful woman.
That's a terrible memory to dive into and use as fuel.
The
But I
fact that
mean,
I'm almost 50 and I still think about this woman,
yeah,
she was the worst,
hmm
the worst.
clearly. Well, the middle grade school environment is transitional. Um, and younger kids are kind of they're the most honest creatures on the planet, and arguably that's the phase of life where we can be truest selves. Kind of before we try to conform and adapt as much to everything, everyone else in the environment. Those middle grade years are fraught with having to learn new friendships, and to navigate all those, being forced to grow up by adults who have influence over us, like me and Catholic school teachers. Um, Rick encounters both of those here. So talk to me about the kind of the thought process of how you wanted him to develop between one and two, because there's a lot of maturity that's kind of happening between those two. It's a weird comparison, but my brain keeps seeing this transformation of Groot between the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and I have no idea why.
Well, I think in those movies there is a found family aspect. I mean, that's essentially what those movies are, and there's some of that here. You hit on a little bit talking about like this particular period is the time when we sort of find cliques and groups, and you watch like existing friendships break up. I have three kids, and watched all three of them go. The people you're friends with in grade school, there comes a point, sixth and seventh grade, when those groups start to divide, and you're no longer sitting at like just moving a lunch seat is like a whole epic
Yeah.
fantasy battle.
Yeah.
So there's certainly that stuff. Um, and I wanted to also, because it's all the first book was just set through Rick's eyes, and obviously fish breath, but it's a non-vocal companion. I wanted to see like the other stories of other Ricks who exist in this world that didn't have the goddess talking to them and how they sort of survived. Stuff with Ula, one of my a new character in the book, one of my favorite things that we've done, like her story and then her with her father and that relationship and all of that. Like it's just a very good time for that, those types of relationships and how friendships form. And especially like the found family when you don't have your own to lean on, how you can find it in others.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you've done it there. No school environment is complete without a few new friends along the way. So, kind of what characteristics the dynamic that you wanted to build between Gabe and Ula and Rick there? Um,
Well, the I guess I wanted Gabe to sort of be like a foil for Rikt in a lot of ways. Whereas Rikt is sort of this free spirit, sort of going, doing what he wants to do. I wanted Gabe like the extreme anxiety of following every rule and putting the two of them especially in the same room.
okay.
The character of Ula, I wanted like an outsider among outsiders because even at this school, she is not going to any of the classes. This character is sort of like, I want to say hired help, but they're not necessarily getting paid. And to have someone like that can recognize that within these groups it's not always all kids are good and all parents are terrible. It's like within kids they're some of the worst people in the world.
Yep.
It's like, and so I wanted to show that like mini society and how you could find people that are also on the outs of that so that you are not truly alone, because even when you feel like everybody's picking on you or whatever,
Yeah.
you're going to find other people that feel the same way. I don't want to spoil too much about the development of relationships between those characters, but there's certain things that I was like interested in seeing people connect in a different way than maybe they had before, and doing things with Gabe, especially as it goes, and the choices that you make in these situations that don't seem to have a way out.
Okay. Yeah. I know kind of after the release of volume 1, you both found yourselves back in the classrooms talking to students, doing some library stuff, bookstores with signings. So how, because this is a middle grade book, so curious about how much that direct input helped shape the development of the Wolf and the Well narrative.
Uh, Not much. I mean,
Okay.
in terms of like, there's always going to be, um, like fail, like not fail safes, but things that are in my mind that I'm not going to have a very violent scene, or it's not going to I think the book goes pretty dark.
It
Like for
does.
me, like the best parts of being a kid were watching like Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal or watching Legend. Like a lot of the 80s fantasy was way too dark because our parents were off doing whatever our parents were doing and
Yep.
we were just watching. And so for me, that's the kind of stuff that I like to tap into. So I don't think that if I was like, okay, this is going to be if I was going to write The Wolf in the Well for adults, would I change all that much? Probably not. But I'm certainly aware that
Yeah.
I'm not going to add things that would take it out of the middle grade market. But at the same time, it's not like here's like a checklist. Like I got to make sure that I do this, this, and this. It's just
Gotcha.
sort of like it just happens. The book wants to be a middle grade book more than I want the book to be a middle grade book, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I kept coming back to The Last Unicorn. That was the thing that tonally, I was like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. And it is. It's I think this it's one of the things that really is appealing about this book, and the reason I love it so much. And my soapbox I always keep beating on is that so many things that are designed for younger readers, for middle grade readers, are just off target with the age. Because I remember what we were exposed to, and every kid is different. I'm not
Hmm.
saying you should put the wolf in the well in front of somebody who's 4, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not not exactly that sort of bedtime story thing. It is a little dark, but it doesn't insult kids.
You can
I think. Yeah.
sorry, right.
No, go ahead.
You can trust your readers without punishing them. right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, so like we had so many discussions in the first book. We really, we played back and forth with that line of like, what was it about those movies we really enjoyed and loved? And then when we, for at least for me, meeting a bunch, going to schools and meeting these kids who are connected with the book, and real, it's a good reminder that like kids can handle a lot more than you think. You don't
Right.
have to, you don't have to
It's
punish them.
gonna happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's it ends up with like Eric was saying, a tone that's kind of for everyone, because you're not insulting anyone, but you're not just relying on like salacious spectacle for its own sake. Like if you respect your audience enough, you can push them a little bit.
Yeah. And well, for you, I know that in the acknowledged you talked about being bullied as a kid and how drawing
Mhm.
was an escape for you. And I really appreciate you putting in that book and not shying away from it. And was it a full circle kind of cathartic exercise for you to be able to talk about school grade bullying and use the voice that was like kind of essentially created partially as a byproduct of it in
I
a
mean,
way?
in a way, I'm just amplifying Eric's voice in a lot of ways,
Okay.
because a lot of, like I said, it comes so specifically from Eric, but it was really encouraging, I guess, even like you were saying, at 40 years old, encouraging to realize somebody I've been working with for 10 years, and we had such similar experiences, in which I have such visible memories of like being in the school library or in the bathrooms and being just so overwhelmed by not knowing what to do or how to handle a situation.
Yeah.
um, raised by parents that were taught to like, well, you just walk down the hall and you cold cock someone in the face, and it's just like, that's not a realistic thing. I don't want you going to jail, and I don't want to hurt this person. I just want him to leave me alone.
Yeah.
And that concept of being like, I know, Rick just wants to be in the woods with his best friend, right?
Yep.
Just wants to be left alone, and that's what drawing always was for me. Was this place where I can just completely disassociate and do whatever I want to do, and explore kind of that endlessness of drawing. And the script itself tackled Rick's similar frustration with that. That there's a moment in part of the book when he's just like trying to plan his escape, and you have another character saying like, "What are you talking about? Why would I go with you?" And it's like, "Don't you realize this is awful?"
Yeah.
And I remember having that same feeling in high school of being just like, why are we doing this? You have a teacher look you in the eye, recognizing that this thing is happening, and do nothing, being like, oh, you're alone. You can feel totally alone in this situation. But throughout this classroom, like Eric was saying, there's all these other people who you don't realize are right there with you.
Yeah. Going through the same thing and experiencing it so entirely different. It's
Yeah.
school, middle grade is it's the weirdest time of life in so many ways. To just delve into and look back and process all our experiences. And there's so much trauma to dig
Yeah.
into
Hmm.
to from it. So it's definitely a fertile playground. I guess we'll put it that way.
Yeah, it is one of the worst times. Hands down. Because once you get into high school and then you get that, you don't have the maturity yet when you're in middle grade, and all of it's coming at once, and your hormones and everything else are going crazy, and there's that pack mentality going on, and
Hmm.
and you sort of like your all of your worth and self esteem is based on how you think others see you, and that's a recipe for just complete sadness and destruction. And then when you get older and then you start to mature and then you find your people, or hopefully you do, and then you go beyond that, it becomes easier. But yeah, I would never want to go back to middle grade. Like Will and I went to a middle grade school in Florida, and like just looking around, and it's like you're like heart breaks for you can see like the quiet ones in the corner, and you're like, I know exactly what you're going through.
Yeah.
Uh,
You want to
but
go
it is
pat
a
him on the
magical time.
shoulder,
Yeah.
Yeah.
be like, it's okay. It'll be okay. You'll get there. Well, I'm just curious here and kind of forgive me for putting you on the spot, but this is completely my own filter bleeding in. But I can't escape seeing parallels between what is happening in The Wolf and the Well and comparing it to the current topography of middle grade library book battleground in America, where maybe that's just my own anger with book banning forcing an overlay that's not really there, but there's certainly an exploration of social indoctrination from the headmaster kind of trying to suppress something seen as other. So
Sure.
I'm pinning you down
Yeah.
a little bit here, but how much is that intentional, and how much of it is just a byproduct of
I
telling
don't.
a?
Yeah, I would say it's not intentional.
Okay,
However, I think that is a repeating pattern that has been with humanity, or at least Western civilization, for hundreds of years. I mean, if you look at that at any point in history, from indigenous people and the school systems that they had set up for that, or in Ireland with Christianity was coming through, like that's been going on forever. And there is like that anti-other, conform, I'm trying to save you. Like even in the book, there's
Yeah.
one particular page of a textbook that's about like the goddess, and it's portraying the goddess in a very negative light, and it's using a lot of stereotypical language. A lot of that was just done from me doing research about some of the textbooks that were going on in like Virginia in the 1800s and everything,
okay,
and after the Civil War. Like, so a lot of that stuff, if you're seeing similarities to that with the library stuff, it's because we've been living with that, and seems like it gets worse all the time, and it's a battle worth fighting. So I'm not
Inescapable.
surprised, but yeah, but I didn't sit down and say like, okay, this is a great parallel for the library. But it's one of those things that's true, and so you can pull something out of it and connect to it in that way.
okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, as the creation of the personalities of Richt and Fishbreath have developed and become more fleshed out, where where can you see both of your DNAs in it, or can you see echoes of yourselves or your loved ones? I struggle with this as kind of a fledgling trying to do some comics writing myself, and I'm always trying to like, oh, this is exactly this person or that person. um and maybe I should get away with that, but I'm just curious how much of yourselves you end up in your characters.
I mean, for me, like it's just like my own self-centeredness. It's almost all me. So
Okay.
stuff that's things that are happening to Fish Breath have maybe happened to me in real life, relationships that he has, or characters, or this was my relationship with this person, that so a lot of that comes through. I don't know Will as well
That's
when he's
I mean, we talked about this a little before in a previous interview once, but like it's kind of the fun is that like he's doing the script, I'm doing the acting essentially, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a blend of both of us heavily. Like I feel Eric in the script when I see these characters. Like there will be moments where I'm like, I know exactly, the face, the gesture, but more importantly, like the tone that he's going for. But then being able to funnel that through yourself, being like, you get to a point where you you can't help but feel for this character so much, and you just the faces you make every day just kind of come out in the drawing, so it kind of like percolates to the surface almost.
Yeah, I mean, I was going back and trying to find slight evolutions in your artistic style between the volume 1 and 2. There's not much, honestly, that I could find, and I know these things take a considerable amount of time to construct. Ultimately, there wasn't a lot of time between putting down the pen between them.
Hmm.
But have you noticed subtle changes in your work? I mean, there's expressions, and maybe that minutia in facial expressions and in the acting is a little more pronounced in the second one. But yeah, maybe that's environmental. You're in a school, so the range of emotions are going to be entirely different.
There's When we first started the project, there was a lot. I remember talking to Eric because like the first story was such a road story, and you're just like you're moving to the next set piece, the next story beat. I really enjoyed the ability to have those characters kind of sit and evolve with each other a little bit. So like having Ula be one way with Rick in the beginning of the story, but by the end feel a greater sense of intimacy with that character, and then trying to like connect to the audience with that. Whereas like having them a little colder in one dimension or two dimensional in the beginning and kind of open up. But it's for me, it's more of because I'm doing the three art jobs of pencils, inks, and colors, and trying to just kind of raise all of the bars at once, 5 to 10%,
Yeah.
but not feel like you're reading through a portfolio piece of mine of like, oh, halfway through the book, I got better at XYZ, so now it's going to be different.
Mhm.
I think especially with younger readers, when I was a kid, I I find that distracting. Like I want to be in that world. I don't want to suddenly, halfway through realize, oh, we got a new artist on, and now I'm in this other guy's world. I want it to feel kind of unified in that way.
Yeah.
Um,
well, I
so
could let's see, go on.
at times it does there will be times when like you're in the halfway through the second act and you're like, I don't like the way I drew that in the first act. And I'm working digital, so I'll just go back and like, nope, we're going to tweak that a little bit. So it has a certain homogenous feel to it. But after each project is kind of where I usually spend my time to like, okay, now let's get their nose to the grindstone and play and learn some new things. And so I can apply it to the next project.
Okay.
I was just going to comment and say Will's work in Goblin, the first book, is amazing. It's phenomenal. But I think he improves panel to panel. Like the stuff, every time I work with Will and every page that comes out is always like better than the one before. And I don't think it's like, to Will's point, I don't think it's like an abrupt thing where you're taken out of it, but I've seen so much improvement just in visual storytelling and where he's putting things and lighting and color work. I know when he first started coloring Goblin, he wasn't confident in it. It was like one of the first books you really colored. Is that true?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, so, and now his talents, like, it amazes me that he's not working on more projects or more books, which is a good thing because we can keep working together.
Hey,
But it is a
I guess
gradual
the one
thing.
who brought me.
Yeah, it's not like you're gonna read chapter one and then you're like, who is it? It's always on model, like it's always on character, but his work is, for me, exponentially getting better.
It is tough because like this is just artist talk stuff, but like I want to be ever since I was a little kid and I couldn't draw a dolphin, like something small. I've wanted to be a best artist I can be. I don't want to be the best artist, but I just want to be the best artist I can be. So I love drawing. That's what I love. If I could just do the pencils forever, I would. But like whatever I do, I just want it to be the best I can do. And I kind of think of it when I'm doing the book. I'm thinking of it for myself 10 years, I was 10 years old. So like,
Yeah.
like I'm what do they call it in Disney? The plussing, right? Like I want to give as much as I can to that 10-year-old version of me, so that he doesn't feel shortchanged.
Yeah, I mean, there's a nice familiarity to it. And for me, trying to evaluate, I mean, I'm doing lots of color work and trying to really jump in that dive in deep in that pool, and that the analysis theme there, where you're staying relatively consistent between, you've got greens and yellows, pretty close to each other on the wheel, if you will. Feels very familiar, right? It's organic. And that's one of the things I was really wondering about between the two volumes. I was like, okay, how much is being in school going to change things? And it didn't that much. Like it felt very consistent and in pocket, and almost like you could read these two things back to back, which I went back and did in preparation for this. And that's where I was really struck, right? It's like, this is nice and continuous and flow. So it's well done.
Thank you. It's it's always a question of like, do you change things maybe for the better, or do you, because like you learn a lot of lessons in that first book. Like Eric said, I was shooting from the hip. I'm learning while I'm doing. And for this one, I felt a little more confident, I guess, in the mechanics of it. So I was able to sit there and say like, okay, enough with what it should look like. What do I want it to look like? And then working with Eric to say like, okay, how do you feel? Is this capturing, and getting feedback from Eric without necessarily letting him know like, this is me taking some risks and playing versus me playing it safe, and seeing how people react to that is huge.
Yeah, the lighting is very, very much on point. I'm a former theatrical lighting designer, so it's something that as a colorist I get really nitpicky about. And that was done very, very, very well.
Thank you.
It very much looked like you would have the same way I would design it on a set on the stage, right? So you have an off light that's up here, and you've got a dancer, and you're trying to hit her face, and all these different things. So it's very well executed.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's take a quick break. Hey, comics fam. Indie comic book publisher Band of Bars just got a level up and announced it is now a cooperative. This heralds a new era for them, including a partnership with Dauntless Stories. And they added several new members to the ownership group. Marcus Jimenez is now Chief Operating Officer, Brent Fisher takes on the role of Chief Diversity Officer, and Joey Galvez is introduced as Head of Kickstarter Ops and Social Media Manager, which is sure to increase their capabilities overall as a publisher. And it further promotes their mission statement of advancing representation, inclusion, and diversity in the media. They also established a new board of directors to help chart the new path of their journey. With new projects in the works like Alas Goodbye dropping in June, Unbroken soon launching on Kickstarter, and Pawn coming up with Dauntless, stay tuned to this space for more exciting news from the growing Bards family. Let's get back to the show.
Increasingly, comics creators are pulling in consultants to make sure their work carries a greater authenticity. This is one of the more unique examples of that, and a group closer to my own heart with the Yellowstone Wolf Project. So back in the day when I was teaching landscape photography workshops in national parks, I'd set aside 5% of my profits annually to go back to organizations who work with it within them, and that was one of the groups I donated to. So how did that all come about?
Well, when I was doing the initial scripting, and I knew at that point that it was going to be sort of two, for people that haven't read it, because this will come out, I guess, before, it sort of is two parallel stories of Rick's adventure and Fish Breath, the wolf's adventure. So when I was doing the wolf stuff, I knew I needed to do research, and I have it on my shelf somewhere. I can't. It was Yellowstone Wolves. So I bought this book, went out, bought the book, reading through it and reading about wolf behaviors, and I found an author, like one of the scientists that wrote one of the articles is Kira Cassidy, and I was like, you know what? I'll look her up. I looked her up. I like wrote her an email and she agreed to be a consultant, which was amazing. So every time I
Mhm.
had a scene or I had a question or how would a wolf behave in this thing, and like what would their body language be like, and is this a believable reaction? And she was able to answer all of my questions. That was the best thing in the world. It was like such a great moment to be reading something and then all of a sudden to be talking to the person that read it. And so she was like, I don't know how I would have done a lot of the wolf stuff without her. I mean, I certainly took some liberties with interactions that were better for the story. Like the story was always going to take precedence, but for the most part, I think we got a lot of it right. And I always loved wolves too, so that was like an important thing to have that. And the fact that the story is about, in a lot of ways, like what your preconceived notion of what someone is and prejudice and how people look at goblins in like a fantasy world as the enemy. In our
Mhm.
world, a lot of people look at wolves in the same way, that they're animals that should be shot because they're attacking livestock, and even our oldest fairy tales have wolves as the main villain. So it was important to get those right and show that that's not the way that it is.
Well, how did you have to approach that? Because Eric touched on something I think really important there that I didn't, which was you have these two, kind of simultaneous narratives going on, and the wolves obviously don't speak. So
Mhm.
there's a lot more visual acting that kind of goes into that. And I was going back, and the last couple of nights been going back in time and rereading Mike Grell's The Longbow Hunters, and it's just absolute master of being able to take two different simultaneous narratives and give them very, very different looks. So,
Mhm.
how did you approach doing that?
It the wolf politics, as I would jokingly call it, is like you said, it's all acting, but it was luckily the script, because Eric had worked so hard on this, was very specific in certain aspects. So like to highlight moments in which like this is important, the tail, their tail should be up in this sequence, whatever. But then having your own Bible to kind of refer to while you're working in it, I would separate those chunks of the story. So like even if a scene jumped back and forth, I would still finish that scene before I jump back to kind of keep that tone and pace and flow. Um, I felt it was a little bit more important to keep the pace up and really kind of structure those scenes a little differently on the page, so that
Okay.
you didn't get page drop, you just kind of lose the flow of it.
Yeah.
But it was very interesting to have this like real life Bible of, even just having a screen of live streams from the preserves, to just like, when you get stuck in a situation, you just watch the animal and kind of put the character in it, or pull from your own past pets and just kind of make something from that.
That is really cool. I didn't think about just being able to watch a live cam. Did you ever
Yeah.
do a screenshot or something like that and be like, this is a
In
great
the
pose, gonna use that?
early in the beginning, Eric sent me a bunch of like a bunch of trail. What was the?
I had a bunch of like, videos
Yeah,
of like nature documentaries and a lot of stuff from Yellowstone,
just
but
running.
also the NewYorkWolf.org. I know Will would watch that. When I was writing those scenes, I would have like
Hmm.
those cams on, and even if you're just seeing it and you're like with them, I feel like you can connect in a different way.
You start to absorb
But
it,
lots of references and stuff. We certainly were looking at.
and you get, it's the small things that, like, the drawings, anything is like it's about observation, right? And finding those little moments that nobody really captures in a glossy, National Geographic photo, but like, this how a wolf lowers its head and how it approaches another wolf.
Yeah.
There's a lot of little tiny nuances
And
that.
it's so hard to write too with barking because like a dog will mostly bark all the time to tell you what it wants, but wolves don't really do that. If they're like alerting you that there's danger or something, they may bark, but it's not quite the same. So it's like when you're doing barking sounds for a dog, it's easy because it's you could sub it in for dialogue or whatever. But wolves howling all the time isn't gonna work
Mm-mm.
visually. So it was like trying to find a way to do that kind of communication.
Yeah, lots of body language. Yeah. Well, did either of you in your wildest dreams ever think when you started your comics journey that the best selling project you'd have, not that you guys are done or anything like that, would be featuring an adolescent orphan goblin and his wolf buddy with halitosis, right? Was that the dream?
I think so. Maybe it was, and I
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, I always want. I mean, comics. Like, we fell in love with comics when we were kids, right? Like, something for kids that has that broad appeal was always the dream. But like, that's why when the script came in, I was like, we're doing this. Like, I want to draw this stuff. Every single bit of it. I got every character is fun. Sometimes you get a project and there's always like one or two characters that are kind of a slog, or you're not gelling with them in particular, but you have to do the work. And for this, it was just like, creating the characters and playing with the characters that reminded me of like being a little kid with your action figure.
Yeah. Well,
And
it
it
looks
is
like. Go ahead.
oh,
Go ahead.
sorry. I was gonna say it is like a cliche at this point, but like this was the book that I was done comics. Like I was done making comics, so I was just writing this one story. And it originally was gonna be a story, and then as Will was saying, he really wanted to do it, and we ended up doing it. So I had no plans of ever really doing a comic after this. It was like
Okay.
we had done Gregory's Suicide together, and that did not perform well. And I just felt so dejected and at a low place, and like no one cares about any of the stories I'm trying to tell. So it was like this was just going to be it. And then I never thought there would be a second. But here we are. So that it's been great. But yeah, those are the types of stories that I've always liked. I think we talked a little bit about it or hinted at it, like as far as the tone. Like originally it was a darker tone, and then as I was writing it, I was like, I don't like this. I like the
Hmm.
Dark Crystal vibe kind of thing, and that's sort of where we ended up. So I think it is kind of the dream project.
Yeah.
But it looks like there may be a volume three question mark. It was a bit more of a cliffhanger, and more like a little
Mhm.
less, I guess, of a cliffhanger, a little bit more like a Marvel movie credits ending. There.
Yes,
So
so there's a little bit of something at the very, very, very edge of the book. I always like to put seeds in for future things. That one's obvious, very apparent in your face, kind of cliffhanger
yep.
ending. But there's always, always trying to plant stuff for future stories. If this book sells well and we do another book, I know sort of a good idea. I'm working on scripts for that now. It's not guaranteed unless everybody listening to this buys like a copy for themselves and their favorite friend. But yeah, it could happen.
Hmm.
I hope it happens.
I
I'm
hope it
keeping
happens.
time in
Yes.
my schedule for it. I mean, that's
There
ready.
we go. Well, on that note, I want to talk a little bit about marketing. Um, I don't know if you give, significant consideration. We were kind of coming up with this initially, but middle grade graphic novels are one of the hottest properties in comics right now. And for most creatives, marketing is scary. It's not what they do. It's not how they think. And I won't speak for you, but most comics creators I know are already suffering from imposter syndrome, which isn't the best platform to
Yeah.
then and go pontificate about how amazing their work is anywhere that'll
Mhm.
listen. And we've touched upon getting in schools, bookstores, libraries. Aside from putting out a great product, which I believe you have, any middle grade marketing advice to share, that is
It
you feel like has worked?
that's worked. Well, I would say just in general, middle grade marketing is a nightmare
Okay.
because it is such a overcrowded, popular market. When you're coming up with marketing, you really have to be not marketing towards the person reading it, but you have to be marketing towards the parent buying it. Because, for one thing, if you're doing paid promoted ads, you cannot, children under 13, you can't, they won't legally show those ads to them. So you have to really think in, more towards teachers, librarians, and parents. That's why if you look at like some of the bigger like Random House Kids or graphics, and you look at the messaging that they have, it's almost always written towards the parent. If you're the parent of someone that will like this, so it's like you're trying to show like the kid's gonna love this, but kids don't really at that age have as much disposable income. It's not like the YA market, like the older market, where you can market directly towards these kids. So it is a tough sort of feel to get your messaging right.
Yeah.
So and I don't know what I'm doing. So like for the first Goblin book, it was just figuring out like how am I, how are we gonna get this to stores? So it was a lot of cold emailing stores and libraries and influencers, like hoping you can contact someone on TikTok or whatever and send them a book. So it's a lot of like throwing things against the wall.
Yeah.
One of my personal favorite thing that we did as far as like what I think worked um, was something Will did really, which was we found certain stores that I knew that carried the book. We wanted to do something nice for them, so we created all these like read posters, like the old was it the LSA? No, what's the Library Association did those
Yeah.
read posters where they have like David Bowie in the jacket and it would say read. So we did that with Goblin, and we sent them to each one of these stores that Will drew it and created
Mhm.
these beautiful things. And one of them, right, ended up hanging it up. Will,
Oh yeah, the local shop Hippocampo here in Rochester ended up hanging one on the wall, but it's yeah, it's a wonderful little connective tissue to the places where we fell in love with
yeah. And
comics.
when they sent that photo, like that was so meaningful to see. Like even though it's not sanctioned by the Library Association, and hopefully the library lawyers aren't on their way to my house, but seeing that and like seeing Rikt in that, like it was amazing. Like that was such a good thing. But it is hard. Like for advice, I found we just did a giveaway, and that seems to be very good. So if you go to our Instagram, when will this air? I don't know when this will air. Will this air
It'll
before July 4th?
it'll be after the 4th.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
had you gone back in time, if you liked the post and made a comment, I'm mailing out like first book and the second book to a person. And that seems to be working because it's getting a lot of likes. People don't have to invest anything. You don't have to give away an email address. Just have to like a thing, comment on it, and say, like, tell someone that they may like it. I found that works really well.
Okay. Okay. Well, what about kind of venturing into the murky world of Gen Zers in their social media realms? I know you both are on TikTok,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm on there. I'm trying to make content, doing my best. I know starting there felt super awkward for me, but now that I have the lay of the land, it's actually getting fun when I have time to put anything
Yeah.
together. But everyone in comics is kind of waiting for that next social media platform, like where we are going to be to replace Twitter. So, how is TikTok kind of helping you reach an audience, or is it maybe?
I don't. Will, do you want to answer your TikTok
I
experience, and I can say mine?
I firmly believe this is a bit of a dodge. I firmly believe the number one most important thing in marketing anything is being authentic, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like I grew up in a marketing household. My dad had his own marketing firm when I was a kid. It's awful. It's the worst thing we invented before social media. And and I feel like Gen Z in particular are finally kind of controlling, driving the car a little bit more, being like we don't want to be advertised to. Like
yeah.
so that while it's torturous, and thank God Eric is brilliant at coming up with ideas for this, it's being your authentic self is the best thing you can do. As soon as you step away from that and start like trying to market towards someone or draw what you think somebody else wants, I think you're dead in the water. So like at a certain point, all you can do is trust your better instincts and make something for yourself and try to just honestly provide it to someone. I don't have kids, so I don't really, Eric in a lot of ways and his kids are my lifeline to like, oh yeah, I find it fine. I'll get on TikTok. But I think finding a way to show the honest parts of your work to the audience that will connect to is your only shot.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting with Gen Zers because that disconnect is really clear at times for me. I mean, I go through it. Obviously, I have a teenager, so at least I'm a little bit in it.
Yeah.
But I'm getting the commercials now. We had them on. I don't know. We were watching a show the other night, and it was for some sort of online dating platform. And I thought it's very memorable. It works in that regard, but it's the weirdest commercial ever to me because this guy has this massive zit on his shoulder, like massive, massive zit, and he goes to his partner on the couch and is showing her, and her eyes get real big, and she comes over and she gets ready to squeeze it, and then it cuts to
Oh.
the this is a matching and I was like, I do not
Yeah,
understand
I don't know what that
why
is.
they did that. But
Well, I would just add to social media. I'm on TikTok. I don't understand it. I don't understand when sometimes I get views, sometimes I don't. And that's because the whole system is just rigged against like you're fighting an algorithm that you don't understand. It's not like the old days of Twitter or even the old days of Instagram where you would follow certain people and then you would see their posts and then you could retweet or repost them. And it
right,
was more of a, now it's like if you don't pass whatever mathematical algorithm they're running your video through, if the lighting right, and then they're going to decide whether or not they're going to show the video or not. So you can do one. We did like for the Goblin book, I did like a dumb thing where I got attacked by bees opening up a book and then flipped through it. Same video got like 200 views on TikTok and 30,000 views on Instagram. Now I don't usually get 30. That was like amazing that it hit like that, but it doesn't make sense. Like the content is basic. You're at the whims of some math equation you don't understand. Is it
yeah,
factor in your age? Does it factor? I mean, you would think it's just how long does someone watch the video? Do they like the video? But I found looking at the data, none of that matters.
It's like
I've had
trying to pick up a quarter off the ground while you're in the middle of like a rush out of a theater. Like there's you don't even have a chance to look backwards and try to calculate what worked or what didn't because it's immediately different. I
Yeah,
feel
some
like.
God mode is above you pointing at people that
And
they want
I'm
to.
not saying I recommend this, but what I'm currently trying, what I'm currently testing out is I'm just trying to like I'll find kind of like back in the day when you go to Comic Cons and somebody would always come up to your booth and be like, you know what I'm telling you, you go to these yarn festivals, they eat up books. I'm making a slaughter there. Like, okay, and then you go and you do and you find your audience there, right? Because those people love these things. I've
Yep.
just like find social medias that aren't the they haven't figured out how to get into your house and dig into your pockets yet, right? So like you go on something like making or even things like the right content on LinkedIn or on Discord or Kara, where you're just like, I think it's death by a thousand cuts. You just got to find all those people and hope they tell two friends. Honestly, the current landscape is so toxic and hostile. I don't know how you have a reliably tried and true thing on a project that takes 3 years.
I think
yeah,
the best thing you could do is get people to subscribe to your newsletter. Like
yep,
Mhm.
right now, until AI destroys email, which will happen, and you'll have AI answering AI email. But until that happens, like at least then it's like people that actually care about you that will read the email, and then you throw out all these different because there's so many social networks, and ultimately always tell people to go back to your website and hopefully they'll sign up for your email, and then they'll stay with you instead of jumping platform to platform. Because right
yeah,
now I'm on so many social networks, and
Yeah, and
I don't want to use any of them, and the pools get smaller. It's like not the same amount of people, so it's like, what are we doing? We're just feeding venture capitalists that like all that we're doing is just feeding into these machines that they're
marketing
going to
for them.
train their AI on anyway.
yeah,
That eventually will destroy us all. So
yeah.
on
I
that
didn't
note,
even know what Kara was until like 3 days ago. So yeah,
Yeah, it's just another new and everything that I've read about it and what they posted, it seems like a good thing. Like they're not doing AI art. Like they're very. It seems like all of the intentions are great, and I hope it succeeds. But I mean, how many of these are there? They just keep coming.
I know.
Yeah, I'm on 12.
It's like
12
remember
social medias
Blue
right now.
Sky and there's Kara, and then there was there's Threads on Instagram. I never use that one.
Mhm.
Right.
There was something called Post. I remember at one time I was on Hive. Does that sound right? I think there
There's
was
a
a
hive.
Hive.
There
Yeah,
was a hive.
Okay.
There's still a hive, but nobody's on it.
right. So it's just like, what is the point? It takes longer to set up the profile, I think, than some of the lifespans of these. You start and then you're like, oh, it's actually shut down. Servers are shut down.
Yeah. Where's MySpace? Bring it back. What we need.
Yeah, Friendster.
Well, I guess then, what is the key you feel like for engagement or with those younger folks? Is that even something? Is it focus on the content, right? Is
Yes,
it true north? Is that
I
the
would
deal?
say that's the only thing that you can control is write good stories and draw good stories and tell good stories and hope that people find them and connect with them because everything else is just marketing. And like Will was saying, you got to be authentic.
Yeah.
I mean, what else is the point? Like, we're not getting rich off this. Like, if you don't
Nobody is.
love the
Yeah.
story and telling the story, like, what are you doing?
I always have, people always offer unsolicited advice and be like, well, you should just, like, go on Twitter and find out what's trendy and just draw that thing. Like, spend 4 hours drawing something you don't want to draw for other people. They're going to feel it versus like, in the past, I've drawn something that I genuinely am having fun with. And I just like, and quick throw it out and put it out there. And you have huge engagement because I think they connect with, if you're not having fun doing it, they're not going to have fun watching it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and sometimes it just takes a while to find your voice. I know with my experience with going through interviews and podcasting and stuff, I tried to look at what everybody else was doing. I'm going to mimic this, and it was kind of boring, right?
Yeah.
When I first
Yeah.
started, because I was just trying to stay in this particular lane, right? And now our numbers just keep growing and growing and growing because I don't know, I'm more myself and I want to dive into process, and apparently people like that. So I'm going to keep I mean, I'm just doing what I'm doing, and it's working. So I'm not going to mess with it. But
Yeah. Get to a part
yeah.
where you can trust yourself almost.
Yeah.
Like, I felt like this book for me, there was like a point halfway through the book where I forget where exactly, but I felt that change of just like, well, it doesn't matter how it's supposed to be done or supposed to look. I want this. And when you start thinking in terms of that, it seems, the edits from Eric come in less frequently. The me looking at my own art and coming back to it and being a little less happy with it was less frequent. It's almost like it's getting to that middle of the lane where you're no longer bumping off the sides every 5 seconds and you're able to just kind of cruise straight towards your objective. It's important to get to that point. I really think it's just figuring out what you like and what you want versus just trying to mimic, draw like yourself.
Which is a little tricky to do in a genre like fantasy, right? Where it is just there are landmines of tropes like everywhere. So,
Mhm.
um, but yeah, I mean, it, this is, and it is not hyperbole or trying to build you guys up or anything like that. In terms of people coming to me, and a lot of people do, like, what I want to get back into comics, give me a fantasy recommendation that will pull me in, or why should I get back into comics and read this? And this is the book, right? I will give them
Thank you.
Oh,
Goblin.
thank you, man.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah, yeah. I absolutely love it. I think everybody should buy it. But before I get into my spiel, what else you guys got going on for 2024? Will, you first?
Me, I'm not anything I can really talk about just yet. I'm working with my brother actually. He's the editor in chief over at Invader Comics. We're working on a secret project for a little bit. I've been working on mostly my own storyboard work and things on the side and preparing for hopefully this release. I've been working pretty much nonstop since February, I think, on just prepping for the release of this. So I don't know. I'm hopefully Goblin 3. It's my plans.
Well, you need to make sure to give your wrists plenty of time, because the carpal tunnel is real.
Oh my god, this week it's
Yeah.
been terrible. I dodged
Yeah.
it for a certain amount of time, but now I'm 40, and it's just like as soon as I
yeah.
turned 41, it took over, and now I'm broken every other week.
And Eric and I are like, haha, wait till 50, man.
I know.
Oh, right?
50's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I'm as I mentioned, I'm going to write Goblin 3. So if it does happen, Will's able to run with it. We're also working on like an Oracle card deck that
Yeah.
we hope to have printed and sell in a small amount. I don't know if you noticed it mentioned in the list of available stuff. We try to do the graphic novels and then things outside of that. Yeah, and then just trying to get hopefully that this launch goes well. It's like sort of locked in, hoping that that the signings go well and that it finds its audience.
I think you've spent so much of your career, especially when you're figuring out how to do this, of like, what would your dream job be? And the reality is, it's like, this is it. This is like having someone you trust as much as your partner, like with Eric, who is delivering you something that's full of genuine heart, not just like trying to pull at heartstrings. So that you can give something 110%, and it's not going to be wasted, because at the end of the day, it's a thing that you put on your shelf and you're proud of. That's where you want to be, right? So whatever he's got next, that's what I want to do next.
Well, what toxic socials are you both most active on these days?
Instagram for me, mostly. I'd say Instagram and Threads, just because I can post images. Kara just recently moved to as well. Is it Kara? Do we know?
I think it's Kara, but
let's ask AI.
Yeah, I would not. Don't hold me to it. I hate Twitter, but I keep getting pulled, and I keep calling it Twitter. I'm not.
Oh, I'm never calling it X.
I'm never
I'm
calling
not doing it.
Yeah. But I end up going back there just to chat. Not that I get much engagement at all, but if I just want to say some piece of nonsense or talk about Doctor Who or something, I'll probably say something on Twitter. Instagram as well. As you mentioned, TikTok. Every once in a while, I'll post something on TikTok. I gave up on Blue Sky, but I am still on there. If you're on there, you can definitely find me and say hi. But mostly I try to get people to, I try to do a newsletter at least once a month to keep in touch with people.
Yeah, I'm a subscriber, and I can definitively say it's a nice little window into your world, right? It's not all marketing. Like, you give a piece of yourself.
No, it's just basic. It's almost like a diary or a confessional.
Oh, I use
you get all of everything. Which became harder. Not to go on a detour, but like I would be really I'd be very vulnerable and talk about all these things, and then like I don't normally write. Like I write, but writing is more of a side thing. I also have like a business where I'm making websites and stuff, and then clients would start subscribing, and it's like I can't be talking about like how depressed I am right now with the person that's also going to be paying my next invoice. So then it gets a little weird. So it's like I want to bring people in, but not people I actually know in real life.
Yeah, do identity, buddy.
Yeah, I like to be open on that. So that is I guarantee when you're behind the curtain, I will tell you exactly how I feel about pretty much everything.
Yes, it is authentic. I will say that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I haven't done a good enough job here to sell you buying Goblin, the Wolf, and the Well, first, I should probably re-examine my approach. And second, let me leave you with this. It will definitely be my choice for exceptional kids comic or graphic novel on our ICE Awards show at the end of the year, the same as the first volume was when it came out. I could definitely tell you that I love it. I was honestly wondering if these two would be able to craft a follow-up that I enjoyed just as much as the first, and they have. And please don't let that middle grade designation scare you away. It has such mass generational appeal. And, as I said before, it is the thing that when people come to me and they want a fantasy recommendation read, I give it to them. So make sure you buy it. Reach out to your local shop and tell them you want a copy of Goblin, Wolf, and the Well. Or if this is your first time that you have been exposed to the realm of Goblin, maybe Eric or Will can tell you where to find out more aside from
Yes. Well, first off, thank you very much. That was very kind. Everything you said. I want to record that and I could play that every time I enter a room. Yes, realmofgoblin.com. You can find out all the information about Will and I, links to our web pages, our Instagrams, information about the books. We have a tabletop D&D 5e game that's for free. You can download that. Find all of it on realmofgoblin.com.
All right. Well, Will and Eric, thanks for hanging out with me on the show today. It's always a pleasure catching up, seeing what you guys got going on and work you're working on.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, man. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. This is Byron O'Neill, and on behalf of all of us at Comic Book Yeti, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Take care, everybody.
This is Byron O'Neill, one of your hosts of the Cryptid Creator Corner, brought to you by Comic Book Yeti. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of our podcast. Please rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. It lets us know how we're doing, and more importantly, how we can improve. Thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Cryptid Creator Corner, maybe you would enjoy our sister podcast, Into the Comics Cave. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.